The wind whistled through the open plains of Montana as the sun began to sink behind the jagged ridges, casting long golden shadows across the ranch. Daniel McGraw, a hardened rancher in his late 30s, leaned against the fence post, staring at the herd that grazed lazily in the distance. His hat tilted low, his calloused hands rough from years of hard work, and his jaw set with the familiar weight of responsibility. He had been alone on this land for nearly a decade now, his wife gone too soon, his dreams buried under debts and the endless grind of keeping the ranch alive. Life had turned him into a man of few words, but his heart still carried the quiet ache of someone who had once known love. On that particular evening, he had no reason to expect anything unusual. Yet fate often finds a way of colliding into ordinary lives with the force of a storm. As he made his way back to the ranch house, Daniel noticed something strange near the barn. A flicker of movement, a figure stumbling in the dust. His first instinct was caution. Out here, strangers rarely meant good news. He tightened his grip on the rope in his hand and approached slowly. What he found made him freeze in place. A young woman, no older than her mid-20s, stood trembling in the fading light. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with tears, and in her hands, she clutched a wedding dress, crumpled and torn. Her eyes, wide and desperate, met his, and with a sob she cried out, "I took it off, please." Daniel felt the world tilt for a moment. He had seen many things in his life, storms that ripped barns apart, wildfires devouring pastures, even neighbors losing everything to despair, but he had never seen a runaway bride standing barefoot on his land. "What happened?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. The woman shook her head violently, clutching the dress to her chest as though it burned her. "I couldn't do it," she whispered. "I couldn't marry him, I had to run." Daniel took a step closer, cautious, reading the panic in her body. Her wrists were red as if from ropes or tight grips, and her gown bore the stains of mud and struggle. She looked like someone who had fought for her freedom. "Who's after you?" he asked. Her lips quivered. "Everyone." It was then that Daniel heard it, the distant roar of an engine, tires grinding against the dirt road. Someone was coming. His gut twisted. This wasn't just a runaway bride hiding from embarrassment. This was something darker. Without another thought, Daniel grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. "Inside," he ordered, leading her to the barn. She stumbled but followed, her bare feet leaving faint prints in the dust. He pushed open the wooden doors and led her behind the stacks of hay. The engines drew closer. She dropped the dress on the floor, trembling uncontrollably, and whispered, "Please don't let them take me back." Daniel's heart pounded. He didn't know her story, but something about the raw terror in her eyes tore through his guarded heart. For years, he had lived behind walls of grief and routine. Now, suddenly, here was a woman begging for protection, and every instinct in him said he couldn't turn away. The trucks pulled up just beyond the gate. Daniel peeked through the barn slats and saw two men climb out, big, suited, with the slick arrogance of money behind them. They shouted her name into the air. "Clara, Clara." The name seemed too soft, too fragile for the way it was being hurled like a command. Daniel saw her flinch when she heard it. He turned back to her. "Stay quiet," she nodded, clutching her arms around herself. The men approached the barn, but Daniel stepped out before they could reach it, blocking the path. His stance was calm but solid, the way a rancher faces down a charging bull. "You lost?" he asked. The taller man sneered. "We're looking for someone. A woman. She belongs with us." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Ain't nobody here but me and my cattle." They exchanged a glance. One of them tried to push past him, but Daniel grabbed his arm like steel. "I said there's no one here." The man yanked free and spat on the ground. "This isn't over, cowboy." With a growl, they retreated to their truck, spinning gravel as they sped off into the twilight. When the dust settled, Daniel exhaled slowly and went back inside. Clara was sitting on the hay, hugging her knees, tears streaking her face. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Then we'll be ready," Daniel replied. For the first time, she looked up at him as if he were something more than a stranger, a lifeline, maybe. That night, Clara told him her story. She came from a powerful family, her father a businessman with more money than morals. He had arranged her marriage to a wealthy associate, a man twice her age with a reputation for cruelty. Clara had begged, pleaded, but her father saw only a transaction. On her wedding day, suffocated by fear, she had fled, running without a plan, without shoes, with only desperation guiding her steps until she ended up on Daniel's ranch. As she spoke, Daniel felt something stir deep within him. He had known loss, but her story was a different kind of cage. And he realized, sometimes freedom isn't won by fighting alone, it's given when someone dares to stand with you. The following days tested that resolve. The men returned, again and again, searching, threatening, offering bribes. Daniel stood firm each time, refusing to betray Clara's presence. Word spread among the neighboring ranchers, and while some warned him to stay out of trouble, others quietly admired his courage. Clara, meanwhile, began to find pieces of herself she thought she had lost. She helped in the kitchen, mended small things around the house, and even learned to ride one of Daniel's horses. At first, she was timid, but Daniel's quiet patience steadied her. Slowly, laughter began to return to her lips, an unfamiliar sound to the lonely rancher, but one he found himself craving more each day. Still, danger loomed. One evening, as the sky painted itself in crimson hues, the men came again, this time with more vehicles, more anger. Daniel knew they wouldn't leave without a fight. Clara clutched his arm, her eyes wide with terror. "You can't keep me safe forever," she whispered. He looked at her, really looked at her, the way her spirit flickered like a flame against the darkness. And something inside him cracked wide open. "Yes, I can," he said. "Not because I'm stronger than them, but because I won't let you go back to a life that kills who you are. And if I have to risk everything, my land, my name, even my life, I'll do it." Clara's breath caught. She had never heard words like that spoken for her sake. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't just from fear. They were from hope. When the men stormed the ranch, Daniel stood his ground with the sheriff by his side. He had called earlier that day, finally choosing not to fight alone. The law intervened, exposing the corruption behind Clara's father's deals. The men were arrested, and Clara's forced marriage unraveled under the weight of public shame. But the real victory wasn't in the arrests. It was in the quiet moment afterward, when Clara turned to Daniel, trembling not from fear but from the overwhelming realization that she was free. She stepped closer, her hand finding his, and whispered the words that had once been broken pleas but now carried strength. "I took it off, not just the dress, Daniel. The chains, the fear, all of it." And Daniel, for the first time in years, let himself feel something he thought was gone forever. Months later, the ranch was no longer a place of silence and shadows. Clara had built a new life alongside Daniel, not as someone rescued, but as someone reborn. She found joy in the simple rhythm of the land, in mornings spent feeding horses, in evenings filled with laughter by the fire. Daniel, too, discovered that love wasn't just something lost in the past. It was something alive, right here, in the woman who had stumbled barefoot into his world. The story of the runaway bride and the rancher spread through the small town, whispered with admiration. People called it a miracle, a twist of fate, a tale of courage. But to Daniel and Clara, it was simpler than that. It was about kindness, the kind that risks everything for another soul. About selflessness, the choice to protect even when it's inconvenient. And about humanity, the truth that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is open your door to a stranger. As the seasons changed, Clara planted wildflowers along the fence line. She said they were a symbol of her new beginning, delicate, yet strong enough to root themselves even in hard soil. And every time Daniel looked at them, he remembered the night she cried out, "I took it off, please." He remembered the fear in her eyes, and the courage it took to trust him. He remembered how that single moment changed not just her life, but his own. Because in saving her, he had also saved himself. And that was the miracle neither of them had ever expected.